what this event is we call it the 21st Century Skills Fair. And it's like a mini conference. So we have a keynote in the morning, and in the afternoon we have breakout sessions, and this is one of the breakout sessions that the teachers can attend.
I see. Okay, great. So today I'm going to be talking about a few different things. So as you said, it's going to be the 21st Century Skills Fair. So I have a few of my presentations. One or two of them are designed for students, one of them is more for teachers, and these are examples of what a video conferencing session might look like, and then also a little bit about video conferencing. So raise your hand if you've used video conferencing in your classroom before.
None.
None. Okay, great. So I think this should be perfect because it's kind of an introduction. But first I need to introduce myself. My name's Adora, and if you're wondering why 12-year-old is talking to you, then at the age of 7 I published my first book, Flying Fingers, and more recently I co-authored a second book. It's called Dancing Fingers, a book of poetry with my sister. So since I published these books, then I've been doing a lot of video conferences with other students talking about reading, talking about writing, and as well as some social studies topics. And so students have really enjoyed the format because, well, for one thing, it allows me to connect with classrooms all over the world, but for another, it also lets them see an example of an author, and we do a lot of collaborative writing, and that's one of the fun things about the technology, is that it allows us to do lots of these things that once you might only be able to do face-to-face. So that's one of my favorite things about it. On another note, for teachers, on what subjects do you teach?
I don't know, do you want to go around the room and
Sure.
just say what?
That would be great.
What?
At social studies.
Social studies?
No, librarian.
Librarian?
Business classes, technology.
Technology classes.
Business.
Language arts. Spanish.
Spanish, okay.
Technology.
Technology.
Great.
Technology.
Technology.
Raise your hand if you are in a subject that was not mentioned yet. Okay. Everybody did it. Great. Okay. So it seems like we have a lot of technology classes, which is interesting, and video conferencing definitely provides a good way of, I guess my one thing would be that since it's becoming definitely more prevalent, especially in business, it might be a good aspect to talk about. So the content that I deliver over video conferencing is mostly language arts and a little bit of social studies, so for instance, a kid's guide to U.S. government, but I also do some other programs, professional development for teachers. Now, one of the presentations that I do is called Myth-Busting Video Conferencing, and it's kind of an introduction to what video conferencing is all about, some common myths that people might think of when they think of video conferencing. It's inspired a little bit by the show Mythbusters, so I start with a couple of myths. Myth number one that I've heard a lot, and this has probably been influenced by, we think of video conferencing in the business world, we think of people, having meetings over the internet, but we don't probably often think as much about video conferencing in a classroom full of shirt and jeans wearing kids. And this is a myth that I would really like to disprove, because video conferencing has many classroom applications. It allows kids to collaborate, present, create, research, motivate. Those are just a couple of ones that I thought of. As a case in point, oops, I was pressing mute by accident in that presentation. So for instance, collaboration. I've heard of stories about kids who are able to connect with another classroom, possibly in their state, possibly somewhere else in the country, and then work together on a project that both of their classes were working on. As far as presentations, getting that authentic audience, maybe someone outside of one's own classroom, I think can be really useful when delivering presentations. Creating really, again, that kind of ties into collaboration, being able to talk with other students, create work, and then researching and motivating. To me, I think that video conferencing is a very motivational tool, because a lot of kids really haven't seen this kind of thing where presenters are piped in over the internet, and many of the students I've talked to think it's pretty cool to see themselves up on the screen, and I know that that's a feeling that I've experienced many times over, even though I do video conferences practically every day. So I would say that video conferencing has a lot of applications beyond just, say, meetings with business people. So raise your hand if you can think of some applications of video conferencing perhaps in your own classroom. And I guess you could just start speaking.
Well, we don't have a distance learning lab yet, but we are getting one. And I was speaking to the person that is in charge of the distance learning lab, and he told me that Every Wednesday they have Court TV, which is held, I think, down in Beatrice, Nebraska. It's not very far away from here. But every Wednesday it's going to be a live courtroom, and they're going to be having criminals come in and sentencing, and so it'll be kind of exciting for my kids at least. So.
Yeah, that sounds like a very interesting experience. I mean, that would definitely be a good application. One of my friends was telling me about a criminal justice class that she took and how they would go around to see courtrooms, but I know that would be like transportation involved, so seeing it over video conferencing would definitely help out with that. Any other ideas for applications?
I'd like to do some with classrooms in Spain or Mexico or any Spanish-speaking country for that matter. And it's a matter of kind of finding who we want to do it with, and if another teacher. Mexico would work the best because we have the same time zone, so that we don't have to have the time issue as we would with Spain, but that's something I definitely want to get set up.
Yeah, and definitely I've heard a lot from language teachers who told me that they've used web conferencing or video conferencing to connect with native speakers, because actually I'm just starting to learn French, and that's one of the assignments, is to find a native French speaker and introduce yourself to them, because I've been learning the introductions, and so that would definitely be fine, because if you live in a community where there maybe aren't that many people who speak a language, and then being able to find them, that video conferencing definitely really opens up the doors for finding native speakers, and then also learn about culture and stuff. I've heard that works really well. Any other ideas for applications? Okay, well, some of the things that I've used video conferencing for, I've used it extensively for talking about writing. Another thing that I've done has been talking about technology, things like blogging. I teach a presentation, it's called Web Detective, and this one's aimed towards generally kids in upper elementary, middle school, especially kids as they're starting to become active with social networking, with doing a lot of research online. And I asked kids, well, actually one of the first few slides, I said, did you know that Britney Spears was killed in a car accident, or that robots were used to win the Spanish-American War of 1998? And then I asked students, raise your hands if you think that what I'm telling you is true. And so one of the cool things about video conferencing is that unlike when you're talking on the phone or when it's this one-way communication, then you're actually able to have that interaction. The kids can raise their hands. I'm like, okay, well, this is stuff that I found on the internet, and it's actually not necessarily quite true. And then I go on to do interactive activities with them. The presentation feature that you're seeing right here, it allows me to go in, show them my computer screen. And let's say we are heading over to a slide with our questions to ask while investigating a website. So then I would be able to go and actually open up a web page. Oops, it's my email. So for instance, let me try All About Explorers.
I don't know if you hit the right button or not.
Adora,
Yes?
we're not seeing the screen now, and we're seeing you, you're froze, so I don't know if you could push another
Uh-oh.
button to,
That's,
there you go. Now
Okay.
There you go.
that's odd. The presentation button's even working. This is actually my first video conference since the summer break, so everything's gotten a little dusty over that time. Are you able to see it now?
It's coming in. Not yet. Now we do. Now we do.
Okay, yeah, so I would be able to show the students, I could go into All About Explorers and say, okay, let's go to Explorers A to Z, and then someone could choose what explorer to take a look at. So Christopher Columbus, for instance. Christopher Columbus was born in 1951 in Sydney, Australia, and right off the bat, then the students are usually able to figure out that that's not quite true. So going through these interactive activities, this is a fairly basic presentation about web research skills, but it's definitely made a whole lot easier by the video conferencing. And honestly, this is something that I could say, I'm able to demonstrate this probably just as well as if I were actually in the classroom, because there's a lot of stuff going on the computer that I'm able to show them close up, and as well as the interactivity there. So that's one of the cool things that I like to do. And then as far as finding content, so for instance, like Web Detective or finding a Spanish speaker, do any of you have ideas on where you might find such content?
I know online there's like the ePals thing, and you can sign up and you try to find people that, but I don't, like I was talking to them earlier, I don't know if they have the conferencing materials. Like I'm not sure if that's something we could do, or we'd have to use Skype, because I'm not sure if there's individual schools and wherever they're coming from would have the conferencing technology.
Now, ePelt is a good one for finding schools in other countries. I think that would definitely work well for if you're looking for a native speaker. One of the websites that I post my content on, it's called cilc.org. Are any of you familiar with it?
Yeah.
Yes, so CILC is one example of where you might find content. So for instance, putting it back on the presentation, if I wanted to look for, say, something about personal narrative, then I might search personal narrative, and then I would get a bunch of programs over here. So that works really well if you want to do a search on something specific, and then you'll be able to find all the programs that relate to that topic. So that's something that I found works really well. Going back to the video conferencing presentation. So this is
That's coming up.
oh, are you able to see the presentation?
It just takes a few seconds to come up.
Well, it's coming up, but can you tell me if your teachers are doing this in your classrooms?
Well, I actually go to an online public school. It's called the Washington Virtual Academies, but I also take 2 electives at Redmond Junior High, so I kind of have experience in both brick and mortar and online school. Right now, there isn't really much of a video conferencing going on. However, there's some web conferencing in my online school, and so yeah, I think it's starting to make its way through. But interestingly, I'm on the West Coast in Washington State, and it's very rare that I actually do video conferences with people in Washington, Oregon, or California. A lot of the video conferencing interest and a lot of the video conferencing systems are located on the East Coast. I've done a lot of video conferences with New Jersey, with New York, and I'm not sure whether that's because of more technology budgeting or just more, going in that direction. But so far, I haven't seen a whole lot of people or a whole lot of schools on the West Coast doing video conferencing, which is kind of interesting. Tell me about Nebraska. What's the video conferencing? Is it just starting, or has the system been in place for a little while?
Well, my own personal opinion is that in the western part of the state, I believe, is more advanced than the eastern part, simply because they had a strong need to actually teach online classes because of not as great a pool of teachers as we have, in the Omaha area.
Mm-hmm.
I took classes that way. I'm from western Nebraska, and I grew up in a town with 400 people in it, so we never had enough teachers. We had to collaborate with other schools. So we called it fiber optics, is what we called it, and we would be in the classroom, and we'd see kids on other TV screens that were in other classrooms, and so I think you're right when you say that. And that was, 7 years ago, so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And partly now, in the position that I have now, part of my job is to start banging the drum on teleconferencing and making schools aware that they have equipment like this in their district, and they are able to do programs like this in their buildings.
And the state did fund that, the equipment, so all the schools have it now.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, then that's actually one of the things that I talk about a lot, is that educational technology is quite important for a number of reasons, because when kids come into contact with something like this, it definitely, that awareness of these new technologies that are going to be used quite often, not just in school but also in business, and I think it's important to know how to use them, but also just, when the technology's there and when it's paid for, and it's so much better to use it instead of just gathering dust in the corner, and I think it's really important to find out the full potential of these things. So I'm glad that you have the video conferencing systems. So that's another thing that I've heard a lot, is that in rural school districts, then video conferencing is also used quite a bit. Another one of the things that I've heard about video conferencing, sometimes teachers are like, well, especially those that don't use a whole lot of educational technology, might be a little worried that it's on the hard end of things to use. It's fairly simple. Like most technologies, there are times when something will go wrong, but in general, it's just, you turn it on, you dial a number, and you connect, much like using a phone. So sometimes your phone will get cut off, sometimes the video conferencing system will. But I think that those are just parts of learning about how to use them. And then, as far as content goes, I've definitely seen a really big expansion in the amount of content and the diversity of the type of content available online now. So if you go to CILC or if you go to another content site with video conferencing programs, you'll see things from universities, from museums, from content providers, from authors, experts. So you really have a wide range of content available. So I need to move on for presentation. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
Great. Now, to me, one of the most awesome things about video conferencing is that it really tears down walls, because you have access to a bunch of programs, to people that you might otherwise not. So, for instance, learning centers, museums, authors and experts, other classrooms, and this connection really emphasizes that as we move into the 21st century, it's a more connected world, and we're able to communicate with people on a massive scale. So instead of just reading from a website or showing a video, you can actually speak live to content experts or collaborate with classrooms around the world. So no video conferencing program is going to be exactly the same as the last one. It's not going to be, here I'll just do this, then I'll do that. And there's really that interaction going on. It changes, it adapts to the audience. It offers a variety of learning formats, like content creation in the classroom, student collaboration, accessing content providers, distance classes. So here are a few examples of activities that a video conferencing school might do. So for instance, Writer's Workshop with the United Kingdom. This was a first grade teacher in New York who then connected with the United Kingdom. So this was an example of collaborative student projects. Awesome Insects, Scram, Squash, or Study. So this one was for science, a distance class. This is one of the more common formats of video conferencing, is the distance class, kind of like the web detective program that I showed you, where you get a teacher and the teacher is talking to the students about a certain topic. And then it operates much like a regular class in that you might get homework or do activities. And then you also have your content experts, for instance, an author visit. And this is an example of accessing content providers. So if there's a person who's an expert in a topic that you're trying to teach, or who you would really like to get in to visit your classroom, this would be a content expert or a content provider example. So video conferencing programs can be more than one kind of format at a time. It could be content expert and collaborative, where you're making things at the same time as you're receiving class. So video conferencing really brings the king to you if content is king. Kind of a little joke I made. And you can find countless programs of different types on CILC, as I demonstrated. So you would find social studies, writing, science, really every topic that you would want to show. And then you can also find which ones have won awards, evaluations, and that's one of the greatest things about going to a website where the content is all laid out, is you can find out what other teachers have said about the programs. So tell me, what's one of the biggest things that you're looking for from a video conferencing program? What do you want your students to walk away with?
Native speaking interaction.
Okay.
Culture, yeah, like I already talked about.
Yeah. Okay. And as far as your own experiences or your own experience with video conferencing, what do you hope to take away from it?
With global awareness, it's, like you said, tearing down the walls of what's around us.
Yeah. And that's an important point. I've heard this from a lot of students, actually. I was running a conference called TEDx Redmond. TED is a conference in California, very prestigious, and TEDx events are independently organized versions. So the one I was running was by students, for students. All the speakers were students. And one of our speakers was talking about how she wanted to have an impact, how all her life she had been learning in a great classroom, four wall, and she really wanted to have an impact on the world instead of just, and really connect to the world, as opposed to just always being inside one little room. And I think that's probably a feeling that's echoed across lots of kids. They want to see the wider world inside the classroom and not feel inside a bubble, kind of, like the classroom is very insular. And I think that video conferencing allows you to really reach out and have that impact. When students are collaborating with others, making projects together, it gives them a sense of doing something and making that impact on the world. So I think that it's pretty effective. Another great thing that I've heard a lot from teachers is that when they're running field trips, the costs can obviously get really high with all the busing students around, making sure no one gets lost. In video conferencing, there's programs like virtual field trips that take students to a museum. You're actually able to see exhibits. The museum docents will be talking about a certain item. So that can be a really effective way of bringing students to experience the field trip-like atmosphere without having to necessarily leave the classroom. So my own video conferences, in my own video conferences, I really try to get students active, and this is one of the things that I look for, that I try to take away from all the video conferences, is asking students questions, getting them to participate in activities. And to me, it's important that all your programs that you request shouldn't just be like watching TV or watching a video. They need to get the students moving and really interacting. I ask myself what makes learning special for me when I'm trying to deliver a presentation. So I like to teach using things that naturally excite kids like myself, using fun visuals, technology, asking questions, and you can really incorporate video conferencing into teaching in order to make the connection between excitement and learning. Are any of you thinking about delivering video conferencing programs yourself, or more taking content into your classroom?
Both.
Both, okay.
At the service unit,
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, at the service unit where I work, we're moving to the next step to start learning how to actually present programs.
Interesting.
Rather than they come to us.
Right, and I think that would be a good idea, having that reciprocal development where you're not just bringing the programs and you're also delivering them. One of the great things about delivering over video conferencing is that it really opens up a whole new market, because if you were just going around class by class in a geographical area, it would be much smaller than if you had the whole world at your hands. So that's another thing where CLC comes in. You can really post programs on there. Are any of you thinking about possibly linking your classroom to another classroom to talk about the same topic? Have you done much exploration with the content collaboration between students?
I taught 4th grade a couple years back. I mean, I used Skype, not video conferencing, but we have a state writing assessment, and so I conversed with an OPS school, a friend of mine I went to school with, and then we shared our essays to each other. And that was really powerful for the kids, because we could kind of see what the other kids were doing and give them good feedback, and vice versa.
Interesting. Okay, so that would be another example of different types of video conferencing. You have bringing in the content, but also having the students work with each other. And again, what I was saying about the classroom and wanting to have an impact beyond the classroom, reaching out to other students in other classrooms. I think that sometimes, say when you're sharing writing with your classmates, and if your classmates have specific interests or specific tastes, and you kind of know what sort of feedback you'll receive, but when it's a totally new audience, that can really provide that new, interesting approach that I think a lot of kids might want. So that's something interesting. So one of the things that I like to do in my video conferencing activities, as I was earlier talking about the importance of collaboration and interactivity, I like to do collaborative writing activities to help reduce a fear of writing in students. And to me, I use the analogy of it's kind of like jumping into the deep end of the pool, and if you all jump in together, it's a little less scary. So I'm hoping that this won't injure anyone's dignity too much, but I'm hoping to step into a collaborative writing activity that I practice with students, and all you have to do is imagine that you are 3rd grade students describing your dream treehouse. So, I'm going to open up a Word document and ask a couple of questions to demonstrate the writing activity. All you have to do to be slightly more realistic 3rd graders is just slouch back a bit more in your seats. No, joking. So this would be to practice descriptive writing, probably teaching a skill like the 5 senses. So why don't we start with what color the treehouse is?
Look brown.
No, pink.
Green.
What I usually do in a case like this, I compromise. The treehouse is striped brown with pink polka dots, and then I move on quickly before people realize that that might look hideous. The treehouse is striped brown with pink polka dots, creating a very visually striking image in the middle of, is it in someone's backyard, is it in the forest, is it in a city, where is the setting of this treehouse?
Mountains.
In the middle of the mountains. After hiking through dense woods and grassy meadows all the way up, you are greeted by a rather strange sight. A treehouse in the middle of all this, maybe a bright treehouse in the middle of all this nature. So maybe I'll put this at the beginning to make the sequence a little better. Okay, so after hiking through dense woods and grassy meadows all the way up, you are greeted by a rather strange sight, a bright treehouse in the middle of all this nature. The tree has these striped brown pink polka dots, creating a very visually striking image in the middle of the mountains. So is it tall? Is it short? How big is it? It is a massive tree house, standing how many feet tall?
100.
400 feet tall, on paper thin stilts. Why not? It sways gently in the wind, along with the rope ladder that dangles down from its door.
Adora,
Yes.
I hate to do this, but we're in a room
Time-
that there's going to be another presentation.
Yes, sure, that's
following
absolutely
this.
fine. Yeah, so thank you so much for being part of this presentation. And just to review, collaboration I think is a really important part of video conferencing, getting all the students to be active. And please be welcome to find all the programs on CLC. That's just an example of kind of what a video conferencing connection might look like with students about writing. And you can really apply the same rules of interactivity to any subject. So thank you so very much, and I wish you best of luck on video conferencing. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.